I've seen a lot of discussion recently on YouTube about whether or not ball pythons are good snakes for beginners. Well, I'm not going to talk about whether or not a ball python is a good beginner snake because most people are just going to get them anyway. But I do want to help anyone that I can that recently got a new ball python. So I am going to talk about the challenges that you will face if you own a ball python. And to help me with that today is my ball python, Jerry. And Jerry is perfect for this because it is winter. He's already had one bad shed. He hasn't eaten for 5 or 6 weeks. And he's been just giving me fits. But I love him. So to start off with, the first challenge of owning a ball python is, as adults, they need a large enclosure. An adult ball python grows to be 4 to 5 feet long, and a minimum size enclosure for that snake would be a 4 by 2 by 2 foot enclosure. And don't listen to anyone who says ball pythons like being in tiny dark enclosures. Your snake deserves better than that, and you can give it more than that. But a large enclosure is what you'll need to plan for. The second challenge with ball pythons, and probably what has been the biggest challenge for me, is humidity. Humidity is crucial for ball pythons. Without it, they will have shedding problems. They need an ambient humidity of 60 to 70% and closer to 80% when they're in shed. And keeping humidity high in a large enclosure with the proper temperature gradient can be very challenging, and especially during the winter when the air is typically the driest. A few months ago, it was the beginning of winter, and Jerry had the worst shed. I just didn't keep the humidity high enough. So 2 months later, and he's shedding again. This time, I was determined for him to have a good shed. I added a humidifier over his enclosure and bumped up the level of misting to keep the humidity in his enclosure at exactly 80%. And I also gave him a larger ceramic water bowl. I've never seen Jerry fully immersed in the water, but I think his water bowl wasn't big enough to find out one way or another. So it'll be interesting to see how he uses this one. Anyway, this morning, on the 8th day after his eyes went blue, I found all of this shed under Jerry's warm side hide, and Jerry curled up in his cold side hide, still working on it. It didn't come off in one piece, but it looks like there's a lot here, so I hope he got it all off. These darkling beetles are all over this shed skin. They really are a good cleanup crew. So after cleaning up all the mess, I left behind some pieces of the skin for them to eat. I'm going to give Jerry some peace and quiet for now, but we'll check back in later and see how he looks. And a little bit later, he came out of his hide for a bit, and I could see he still had a good-sized piece of skin stuck to his back. So he went back into his cold side hide again and worked and spun himself around until he finally worked it all out. And as he basked under the heat the next morning, he looks as beautiful as ever. His colors are their very best, and after finally having a good shed, every scale on his body is perfect. To put this into perspective, my corn snake, Pumpkin, went through a shed at about the same time. And I gave his enclosure some extra misting to help with that. But I didn't have need to worry about him at all because he always has perfect sheds. And this time he did too. Anyway, right now I'm very happy, but I know that it will be just a matter of time before Jerry has shedding issues again. I mean, he is a ball python after all, and it's going to happen sooner or later. So another challenge when it comes to caring for ball pythons is that they can be picky eaters. It's crazy how picky Jerry can be. Sometimes he'll strike his prey, and other times I have to leave it for him to take his time and inspect. If the rat is too small or too big, he won't want it. He only eats white ones. If the rat is black or even half black and white, he won't want it. And along with being picky eaters, ball pythons will go on hunger strikes. Hunger strikes are when your snake refuses food for any length of time. And any snake can do this, especially in the winter or when it's breeding season. My corn snake recently refused food for 4 weeks in a row. But ball pythons are notable for going on hunger strikes. If you own a ball python, it will go on a hunger strike at some point in time, maybe for weeks or maybe for months. And hunger strikes can be very frustrating for a snake's owner. I mean, you can't help but worry about your snake when he's not eating. Jerry goes on a hunger strike at some point every winter, and he's actually doing that right now. He hasn't eaten for about 6 weeks, so I'm hoping that this new shed prompts him to eat. But instead, Jerry just played with it. I've actually never seen him do this. He usually just eats or he checks the rat out and ignores it. But this time he grabbed it in the middle of its body and he dragged it around by its tail and then eventually left it behind and went back to his favorite usual basking spot. And here are my final thoughts on hunger strikes, especially with ball pythons. But this comes with a big condition. As long as you can rule out that your snake hasn't lost too much weight and that it's not ill, and your snake's enclosure is set up properly with good hides, clean fresh water, moisture retaining substrate, and proper heat and humidity, as long as I know the husbandry is on point, I try to not let all of these behaviors stress me out and just let nature take its course. My opinion is that some of these challenging behaviors, while frustrating for the snake's owner, are actually just normal behaviors for a ball python. Mother Nature and my snakes are smarter than me about some things. Snakes can go a long time without eating, and sometimes, apparently, they need to. When they're ready to eat, they'll eat. So I'm not going to say that a ball python is not a good beginner snake, even though I think it's kind of not. But I will say this. It's so important whenever you get any kind of new reptile to do as much research as you can. But with ball pythons, doing that research is even that much more crucial because of these challenges that you might face. So if you have a ball python, you need to do as much research as you can and just become an expert on ball python husbandry and care. You should probably make a list of these challenges and research each one of them thoroughly. Are you done? I love Jerry, but he's by far one of the most challenging animals that I take care of in the reptile room. But he makes up for it in a lot of ways. And at this point, I just can't imagine my life without him. So those are some of the challenges that I face taking care of a ball python. And those are challenges that anyone will face taking care of a ball python. If you've recently gotten a ball python or you're thinking about getting a ball python, these are just things that you have to research and be prepared for. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you found it useful. And stay tuned to the channel because I have some really awesome things coming in the near future. And I look forward to seeing you again in the next video.